All right, welcome back to the channel. So it looks like Canelo Alvarez might be available for even more PBC fights after the Caleb Plant fight, the Jermall Charlo fight, the David Benavidez fight, because he talks and praises Al Haymon and is really enjoying the working situation that he's in. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. I think this interview with Canelo Alvarez was interviewed, I do believe it was by Fight Hype, and he was talking about his, the new situation that he's in, the fight with Caleb Plant. And he was specifically asked about how he likes working with Al Haymon and all of that. And he was and he praised Al Haymon and said that he enjoyed working with them. He loves being in the circumstance that he's in. And what I'm hoping that means is that we're going to actually get to see a lot of really good fights out of Canelo. I am somebody that, I'm of two minds with Canelo. On one side, I know that Canelo Alvarez tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, and I don't like that. I don't like that in anybody in boxing. I don't care who it is that if they were in that scenario, I would say something about it. I'm a big fan of Errol Spence Jr., but if Errol Spence Jr. popped dirty, I would say that he popped dirty. And that would just be something that was hanging over his career. The way that boxing is and sports are now with as many people that are on it, you never know when you're watching a fight when somebody is juicing, but I would continue to watch the fights. I'm a fan of boxing, right? I'm not going to boycott Canelo. I'm not going to boycott the Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder fight or any of these other guys just because they tested positive. I'm just going to do my part and point it out. And hopefully the powers that be in boxing, solve that situation. But as far as, getting to see good competition and getting to see good boxing matches that help grow the sport and that people are interested in, between the best fighters that are out there, the best fighting the best, Canelo Alvarez has to be in the conversation of the best fighting the best. And when the beautiful thing about Canelo Alvarez's career and when I became a fan of his was early on in his career when he was fighting on Showtime, and he really was one of the best young fighters coming up, if not the best young fighter coming up, and he was fighting top-notch competition. When he was fighting Austin Trout, when he's fighting Erislandy Lara, he was fighting Miguel Cotto, fought Shane Mosley, even though they were a little bit older, right? Was really fighting a lot of guys where I was like, man, he was coming up on Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s undercard, beating these guys and really creating a lot of excitement because of how skilled he was, right? He was very skilled and he was fighting the best competition. After, there was a rift between Oscar De La Hoya and Floyd Mayweather Jr., where the PBC broke off from Golden Boy, which, as years go by, it seems like fewer and fewer people really appreciate that really Canelo Alvarez and all of these guys were fighting on the same network, right? We're fighting on a lot of the same cards. So Canelo Alvarez fighting, on a card that's managed by Al Haymon or the PBC really isn't anything new. It was something that he was doing when, during the better part of his career. His career and at least the competition level with his career shifted significantly when Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy left Showtime and went back to HBO, and Canelo Alvarez, and basically after the Floyd Mayweather Jr. fight, sold Canelo over there to HBO and then started building his name over there in HBO. Once he got to HBO, that's when I think, for me, I started seeing a lower level of competition for Canelo Alvarez and a greater level of hype. Now, not saying that Canelo Alvarez doesn't deserve the hype as being an excellent fighter. I think he does. And honestly, I think he's a guy that if he was at 154 pounds and there was no performance enhancing drugs in boxing and everybody was fighting on an even playing field based on his skills, I think he would still be one of the best fighters out there. But it's just when he was with HBO, he wasn't really fighting the level of competition that I wanted him to see. I think the highlight of his stint at HBO was when he fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. That was his real big pay-per-view over there that launched him into the DAZN contract, because once HBO went away. Then Golden Boy went over there to the zone. And when he got to the zone, and I think he was over there for like the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, it may have been about 11 fights. I forget the exact number of it. He winds up fighting, a bunch of UK fighters that are closely associated with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, and the competition level dropped off. And so now, for several years, we've been wanting for Canelo Alvarez, right? Canelo Alvarez became somebody that is an excellent fighter and is a top pound for pound fighter. I can't have him on my list just because that would be because I have a stance on performance enhancing drugs. There's a lot of people, that don't have that, right? They believe that if a guy tests positive one time and then after that he's clean the next fight or clean moving forward, they just kind of go with what happens moving forward. And, it's kind of forgive and forget for when he tested positive, right? If I had that mindset, then I would have Canelo as my number one pound for pound fighter, because I really do believe if you look at all of the criteria or multiple types of criteria, whether it's the resume the guy has, whether it's his actual skill in the ring, right? The skill in the ring, what you think he would do, if his style moved up different weights and all that. I think Canelo Alvarez really does fare well, and he's an exceptional fighter. And there's only, I believe, only a handful of fighters that are as skilled as him. I mean, Terrence Crawford, I think, is somebody that's, the combination of his athleticism and his skill is close to his. I think Errol Spence Jr. is somebody that is tremendously skilled and has an excellent resume. But if it wasn't for that steroids, I would have Canelo up there. But now that he's back with Showtime, and the other avenues for Canelo aren't as good, right? There is no Showtime. There is no HBO for him to go to. ESPN doesn't have anybody really in his weight class, and they're not really big. They're kind of, boxing is a secondary thing. I'm not really sure if ESPN is going to be able to really willing to invest in Canelo Alvarez like Showtime is willing to invest in him. And obviously he's done with his DAZN contract, and DAZN is really looking to decrease the amount of investment that they have in U.S. boxing. They just believe, and this was out of and I'm not listening to Eddie Hearn about DAZN and where DAZN's going. I'm listening to the guy that is actually running DAZN, and what he says is that it doesn't make sense to invest heavy in the United States because it's just too competitive, right? He doesn't, the fights are too split up. There's some good fighters on Fox, some fighters on Showtime, and DAZN really wasn't getting their bang for the buck. So going forward, I think Canelo Alvarez's best options and best relationship is going to be with Showtime. And if that's the case, then he's going to have to fight fighters that are on Showtime, right? And those are the and Showtime is pretty much exclusive with the PBC. I'm not sure. I'm sure there's some guys like Jaron Ennis. I don't think he's technically a PBC fighter. Right, I can't remember. I think he might be with Cameron Duncan, right? Who can do fights both with Top Rank and can do fights with the PBC. But there's a heavy influence and a really long-standing relationship between Al Haymon and Showtime. And the fighters that are in his weight division, the 168 and 100, 160, 168, even 175 are guys that are with the PBC, are guys with the PBC. My preference for him would be to be with Jamal, to fight Jamal Charlo and to fight David Benavidez. I know there's things that Canelo Alvarez said about him not fighting Mexicans anymore, but hopefully, that's not something that stands true. Now, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, no, Canelo's not really with Showtime. He's not really with the PBC. And I understand that. I know he doesn't have an exclusive contract with Al Haymon, but just the fact that he's a free agent and there's that, and Al Haymon has access to the money, Al Haymon has access to the fighters, to reasonable competition for him. That means that he's going to be in a discussion with the PBC whenever his fight dates are up, and they always have a chance to get it. He may go off, one time or the other, but who else out there has got $40 million and a pay-per-view set up in the United States besides the PBC with what they have with Fox and what they have with Showtime? So, all in all, man, I'm happy. As far as Canelo Alvarez goes, that is something I'm really happy about that we're hopefully going to be able to see him get in the fights with the actual best fighters in that weight division. Because I don't think Canelo Alvarez is somebody that didn't want to fight the best competition when he was with Showtime, when he was with HBO, and didn't want to do it when he was with DAZN. I really think that that's just the circumstance that he was in with the promoters that he was working with. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.